Hey guys, alright, today we are going to be watching another simple history video, this time life in a medieval village. Now as you guys know, I am a Anglo-Saxon historian, late 800s into the early 900s, and pretty much just Alfred the Great. I know some of Edward the Elder, but not too much. Now what I see here, if we look at the castle in the background, this is probably more what you typically think the time period of the typical medieval time. So like past the year 1000, maybe 1100s. I'm not entirely certain. This looks like a Motte and Bailey, so kinda, or the transitioning from Motte and Bailey. Now what I like already is the color on the peasants here. They wore green, they wore blue. They would not wear purple. Purple was reside for royalty, the wealthy royalty, like the king or an emperor. But yes, there's color here. I like it. Houses, and what I like here also with the houses, thatched roofing. And then but some like different style roofing. You know, there's variety here, and looks like a little bit of the houses might be whitewashed. Good. I like what I see already, so let's go ahead and dive right in.
Life in a medieval village, Western Europe. During the Middle Ages, the majority of people lived in rural villages rather than urban cities or large towns. But what was everyday life like in a medieval village? The truth is, like many periods in history, medieval life differed from village to village and from person to person.
True.
Life in a medieval village depended on someone's class and role in society. Generally speaking, though, the medieval village was the domain of the peasant. Peasants were the lowest class of society, but they actually made up the majority of the entire population. For this majority, the village was the center of their universe. They were born, lived, worked, attended church, were married, had children, and died all within the same area.
Very true. Yeah, you would pretty much live in the same village. Like the only class or members of society that would have had the benefit of perhaps moving around would be like the blacksmith, maybe. If he's a really skilled blacksmith, he'd have opportunities to go somewhere where he's paid better, of course, paid by a different lord or something. And merchants would have the opportunity, but merchants wouldn't really live in a village. They'd probably be living in a city for the most part. There'd be the local merchants, but they would not be as wealthy as the city merchants.
Today,
and then of course
we
the
might
priesthood
imagine a
gets
medieval
to move
village
around,
as a
of course.
line, square, or several little rows of houses, with a tavern and a church. But the medieval village actually took on many forms. It could be several houses clustered together, but a village could also be several scattered hamlets and farmsteads, far apart but under the control of a lord.
True.
Most villages
Yes.
would have been houses concentrated around a lord's manor, that is, an administrative device by which a lord charged rents and taxes from peasants.
Correct.
By far the most common villager was the serf. Serfs were the lowest class of peasants and owed fealty to the lord of the manor. Though they were legally free, therefore being different from slaves, they were nevertheless legally bound to the land where they lived and worked, and they were not allowed to move away. The lord of the manor would barely, if ever, be in the village. Instead, he would be away fighting in wars or performing acts of royal service. Manors would be surrounded by huge fields, usually 3 of up to 100 acres each, which would make up the land for the village.
Depending where you live.
In exchange for living on the land, serfs were expected to pay rent and be responsible for working the land. In northwestern Europe, much of the work revolved around farming cereal crops such as wheat, barley, or rye. Fields surrounding the manor would be worked in rotation, and each would be divided into strips to be worked by individual peasant families. Village fields that weren't fit for growing crops would be used for grazing animals, such as sheep for wool.
Correct.
Beyond the fields would often be woodland, which gave fuel and building materials or where wild animals could be hunted for food, but only for a privileged few.
Okay, good. I'm glad he
Resources
added that.
cultivated in the countryside villages would feed and provide for the village residents, but would also be transported to those living in nearby.
Hold on, what I'm seeing here, I don't like what I'm seeing a bit here. Now, yeah, they're working the field, so they're going to be dirty. Okay, we'll give them that. We'll give them, all right, they're dirty here in the fields because they're working right now. The teeth, though. The diet that the medieval peasant had was not really a diet that would, you know, corrode your teeth. Now, certainly, if they chipped a tooth or a tooth broke and they had to get it removed, right, they're not going to get like you get today, you can have a new tooth, a fake tooth put in. They wouldn't get that unless they're like rich or something and they could have like a gold tooth or some shit put in. I don't know. But their teeth did not look like that. No. There were means of cleaning teeth. They had a version of toothbrushes. I watched what was his name? Modern History TV. I believe that's the channel's name. He did a couple videos regarding their diet. In fact, I reacted to the one of those videos on this channel a while ago now, and it was very informative. And then he has another video where he talks about how they clean their teeth. The teeth would not look like that. They wouldn't look like that. Maybe for some, but their diet did not have the sugar, or just it did not have the shit that we have in our modern diet, right? The fake stuff. Their teeth were fine. Their teeth arguably were probably better off than ours, honestly, because they consumed like no sugar. They had very little sugar in their diets.
By towns and cities. For the village serf, daily life was difficult, backbreaking, and a constant struggle for survival. From starvation to the plague, it seemed as though the threat of death was always on the horizon.
Kinda true, yeah.
The average village house might have had a low stone wall and a thatched roof, and would have been built mostly out of timber and wattle and daub, a lattice of wooden strips clung together with a mix of wet soil, clay, or animal dung. The majority of medieval villagers would wake at sunrise in order to make the most of the working day. They would work extremely hard from dawn to dusk, with meager meals of bread and pottage, a thick soup made from porridge, peas, and beans. Most villages kept communal cows, so milk, butter, and cheese would also make the menu, with meat being an extremely rare treat until the 15th century. Ale was part of the payment that the peasants received for working the lands of the manor. The peasants received portions of everything produced on the land, although more expensive items were given in smaller quantities. Villagers were highly religious due to widespread Catholicism at the time. They would go to church daily, if not multiple times a day. However, unlike the nobility or richer folk living in cities and towns, village peasants weren't expected to do more than the bare minimum when it came to their daily prayers. It was thought that if you performed your duties by working hard, plowing the fields, and providing for the realm, then you would be rewarded in the afterlife. Daily life in a medieval village would also change depending on the time of year. The necessary work for villagers depended on the month, whether that be harvesting wheat in July or slaughtering farm animals for food in November. Medieval time was also heavily governed by the church, with every month bringing New Saints' Day and the hours of the day being tracked by the church bell. While village life was extremely hard work, the sheer amount of religious feast days meant that there was always cause for rest and celebration. However, not all those living in the village would spend their days as serfs working the land. Some would be a higher class of peasant. In the lord's absence, the village manor would be run by a steward, the highest-ranking village official. Each village would also have a bailiff, a man appointed to supervise over the agricultural work done by serfs. Understandably, they were not very popular amongst the villagers.
No.
There would also be trade workers such as bakers, millers, and blacksmiths. Each village would also have its own priest. To be the village priest was to be in a position of power and respect, as they were considered to be absolutely necessary for the salvation of everyone's souls. The medieval village was remarkably self-sufficient, with an immense sense of community. Villagers would produce everything they needed themselves, in contrast to those in urban areas, which in the 12th century were starting to grow and relied on resources sent from villages. Villagers would make their own clothes from leather, linen, or wool. They would grow their own food using farm tools made by the village blacksmith. They could grind grain for flour at the village mill, and there would be communal bakers where villagers could bring their loaves to be baked. Villagers were also practically self-governing. In medieval England, a law system called frank pledge was put in place, which meant that all villagers were equally responsible for the behavior of their peers and neighbors. Between 1346 and 1353, the bubonic plague, known as the Black Death, claimed 30 to 60% of Europe's population.
Medieval video without the plague.
In the wake of the plague, so many peasants had died that there were fewer villagers to work on the land. Peasants therefore realized they were a valuable commodity, playing an important role in providing for the realm. They were able to demand higher wages, better working conditions, and lower taxes. These demands led to revolts and uprisings, and eventually led to many peasants rising into higher roles within society. The lower population also meant that fewer crops were needed, driving the price of grain down. Villages that had initially thrived through the growing of grain in large open fields fell into disrepair, and over time, many were deserted until the 16th century. All in all, after the devastation of the plague and the changes in social structure that followed, medieval village life was never quite the same.
The rats have the evil eyes. That the video? It's just gonna be. Are we just? Okay. That weird awkward silence there at the end. Yeah. This was a good video. Better than I was expecting. Because simple history, and when just the term, the basis of their channel is telling history in under like 10 minutes. And sometimes there can be misconceptions or outright wrong facts spread in short videos, right? You have to be careful about it. And they did a good job here. They did not mess up. At least I don't think so. Yeah. I don't know what else. This was a good video. I love some simple history. They're nice and short, easily digestible, and pretty much always provide a good amount of information in the short amount of time that they give it in. But yeah, that is going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.